Are you all about work, work, work? For many people, their job inspires devotion and effort like nothing else, and there's a name for it, Workism. Has it become a new religion? Welcome to Roundtable. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm David Foster. Work to you may well be just a means to an end, simply a way to earn a living. For others, it is their very identity and life purpose. And therein may lie the dangers.
Do you stay late at work because you want to? Constantly plugged in to office emails? You might be suffering from workism. Workism is the concept that work is the centerpiece of our life's purpose, almost a religion, defining identity and providing a sense of community. Workism tells us that human happiness is tied to work. Anything to promote human welfare must encourage more work. Pleasure comes not from leisure, but from employment. As a result, employees can overwork to the point of exhaustion. The World Health Organization classifies burnout as a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development list of mostly developed states, Mexico has the longest working hours. The US comes in the middle of this list, and Greeks rank the worst in Europe. This year, Japan's government imposed a cap on overtime, following its reputation of death by overwork, or karoshi culture. So are we addicted to work?
And we can say hello, first of all, from Portland, Oregon in the United States on the West Coast, Manish Thakor, who says she's a recovering workaholic, with me in the studio. Noel McDermott, psychotherapist. Nada Kakabadse is here from the Henley Business School, and Jonan Boto, the founder of Mama Kari Presents, a charity bringing awareness to mental health in the workplace, among other places. Great to have you all on. I think this is a pretty important subject, isn't it? Because it's about people's lives. So now let me come to you first of all. The Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development says people don't seem to be happier about their working lives than they were in 1952. Symptoms of work-related stress, but they should be happier. Why aren't they?
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of pressures now on people in the workplace that didn't exist before. You come across the term workpreneur, that we're all workpreneurs now. We don't have an employer, we don't have a career. We have to sort of forge our own path, as it were, or plough our own furrow. And that's quite anxiety-provoking for a lot of people.
So are we happier as herd animals?
We are, definitely, because we're designed to be herd animals, much more than we are designed to be sort of standing out on our own. We're not lions. We're definitely herd animals.
So it's
We're
the stress
animals.
of isolation.
It's the isolation, it's the lack of social connection, it's the increased competition, and the lack of a feeling of being part of something. And then we feel this isolation. It increases the stress hormones in ourselves, and then we are dissatisfied in general in life. Stress being what we call a sort of having a global impact upon our health and well-being. So the more stressed we feel, it doesn't matter what else we're doing, the stress will override it. But it's this insecurity, I think.
OK, so Nada, let me ask you this one. You've written about this.
Yes.
Workaholism.
Yes.
What is different now with the sense of isolation, the sense of expectation, the workapreneurs? What is different to 35 years ago when we still all had to get up at 6:30 in the morning to go to work? We still had to do the job that we were asked to do. What has changed?
The pace of change has changed. The change has always been with us. However, now that pace is much faster, that we're living in what they call liquid time. No change has time to settle in, and that we know this is a base from which we operate. It's a liquidity, so time, space, everything changes very fast.
So we were all able in the past just to slot in, and whether we were comfortable or not, we had some kind of cushion.
Well, yes, we have time to understand where we are and to have some kind of stability. We had a feeling of stability, okay? We don't have that feeling of stability anymore because changes are completely rapid all the time. And we feel more insecure. People feel very much more insecure.
Jonan, I will come to you in just a second, because the story of your mother is a very interesting, very sad one, but it's led you to where you are now with all of the work that you're doing. But Manisha, I want to come to you first of all. You say you are a recovering workaholic. Please tell us what the difference is between workism and workaholism. I think it's important. But we noted that you said you were isolated at work, you felt rejected, you felt unwanted and couldn't cope. Well, c'est la vie, isn't it? At work, we either do or we don't.
Well, actually, that was my childhood that you're describing there. And what happened as a result of growing up and not feeling like I fit in was I turned to academics and I excelled. And then I went into the workplace and I excelled. And I got to go to Harvard Business School and I went to work in investment banking. And eventually what happened was, as a result of not feeling like I fit in as a child, I learned to use academics and then work as a substitute form of identity for that herd. And I never connected with a herd, so I connected with work. And the difference in my mind between workaholism and workism is workaholism is deeply psychological. You're using it as a coping mechanism to cover up some inner hurt, as opposed to workism, which I think is rampant these days, which is where we're getting our connection, getting our identity, not because we're dealing with some wound from the past, but because that's in the modern world, how we've been socialized.
But we were talking, sorry to interrupt you, we were talking in the office earlier on about the good old days, if you like, some of which I can remember because I've got a couple of grey hairs now. But that was when the postman was the postman. That was when the milkman was the milkman. They knew where they fitted in. So they were defined by their work in the same way that you're suggesting people these days can be defined by their work.
It's a little different because today, the milkman can go on to become the CEO of a tech company that he happens to create as part of his side gig. And so I think as the ability to move up the ladder has become so pronounced, thanks to wonderful things like the spread of education and technology and breaking down some of the barriers in class, now if you are not something big and significant at work, that's your fault. Whereas the milkman might have felt, well, my dad was a milkman, I'm a milkman, I don't have to worry about it.
I can sort of see where this is going, and we'll try to get on to remedies and having the psychotherapist with us here. That may well help. But tell us, Jonan, Manisha, back with you in just a moment. Jonan, your mum, I believe, took her own life because she felt under too much pressure. She worked for the BBC. I don't know whether that was the only problem that she seemed to have, but you are now helping people who may find themselves in stressful situations in the workplace.
Yeah, so we're at the start of our journey. I think other guests that have been in this field for longer than I have. But 2 points. One is my mum's work was so much of her identity, and actually in a beautiful way. I've almost got that passed on to me. So I want to do this thing because it feels purposeful to me. Now, there's dangers to that, because I remember then when my mum was, say, 6 months of anxiety, depression, suddenly was talking about early retirement with the BBC, and suddenly that sense of loss, the identity she's going to lose, the question she would say repeatedly was, when I meet people, and they ask me, what do I do? What will I say? How can I answer that question? So that was a really dangerous place to be, and I can see that now. The only other point I'd put out about nowadays the new generation and entrepreneurs, they, at least back in the day, we would see yourself, David, and think, right, my path, I can see the path up. Whereas now, it's not so clear where the path's up, because you're told, right, you can't be a person in the same business for 30 years. That's not how we do it nowadays. And you're not so sure what is the route. So
you see, you sort of can be the same person in the same business for 30 years. It's just that people place greater expectations, perhaps, on themselves and think, well, actually, if I don't do well at that, if I don't like that, I can always go off and do something else. So do we need, in terms of settling our own psyches, to go back to the idea of job for life, boring, but it pays the bills?
I think we need to go back
Some
to the
people
idea
anyway.
of connecting with other people on a very deep level. I think the points that have been made about there are two, from the workism, workaholism, really important points. If you're using work to compensate or try and overcome or mask actual psychological problems, you're always going to fall up. But workism is slightly different in that people are then, what they're trying to do is create an identity and a sense of self from it. And the problem with that, if you only take it from one sphere of life, work, you end up being a very, very shallow and dependent person. And then when you have knocks in life, say in your work sphere, because you haven't invested in all the other spheres of your life, that becomes incredibly important. And you lack what we call resilience, so that you haven't developed the whole of the aspects of your life as a human being. So this overinvestment, and I think coming back to another point you've made, I think one of the things that's going on is exposure. Is the amount of exposure that we now have through social media, etc. We're all there on television. We're all there on social media. Anything we do is judged and looked at.
Can I posit this one? Okay, you say there was a time, or there is a time, when we are so invested in our work, we don't have time for any activities elsewhere. We become one-dimensional characters, and that is a problem. On the other hand, let us go to the idea that Jeremy Corbyn has put forward, leader of the UK opposition, saying we need a 35-hour week. We need to have more leisure time. If you have more leisure time, then you're going to be out there doing people. But the point is you won't be able to identify that with that because you don't have a meaningful work because you're only turning up for 4 days a week.
We're not pushing people. And I think employers have a lot to do in this area as well, in terms of encouraging their staff and their teams to become much more rounded human beings that are invested and involved in lots. So great employers, good employers.
How does that benefit them?
Well, great employers will do things. They will have schemes with their staff where they get them involved in volunteering activities, for example. And they know it's really important that sense of being engaged outside of the business place actually motivates their staff and encourages them. It improves mental well-being and improves functioning within the organisation.
Any one of you, don't wait for me to ask a question because you're all experts in this, but I'll just throw this one up there. Used to be a 48-hour week, now it's 37, could end up being 34. More money, more free time. These are just snowflakes whinging. What do you think?
Well, I think the problem is much deeper. It is a really structure of our society, and I think it's a financial structure that at the moment everything is a very much short-term with very low investment in the long-term things. So people are working much harder to achieve, efficiency.
Are they really working harder?
Yes, they do. They do work harder. They work longer hours in Anglo-American economies.
But they don't work as longer hours than they did a generation ago or a generation before that. Well, this is where I'm saying these are just...
Okay, but that is Anglo-American economy. But Anglo-American economies always work longer hours in comparison to European economies.
Okay, but I mean, a piece of string that is a yard long is longer than a piece of string that's 2 feet long, but it's not a very long piece of string. You say they work longer hours than somebody else.
So one point you've got
not
to
very
remember,
long.
it's not the length of hours even. Often it's the intensity of the hours, and often it's always feeling on. So 40, 50 years ago, if you didn't have a smartphone, you didn't have email. I mean, email's the most ridiculous thing in the world if you think this inbox of 100 things you've got to do. You didn't have that back in the day. If you were a doctor working hard, you'd work really hard with the rest of your team. You'd all go to the pub afterwards. You'd know you have to be in at 6 a.m. At least there's some form of relationship there, whereas now you're working really hard, you go home, your smartphone's there, you know you're going to check it. Yeah. You know at 8 p.m. you've got to reply. It's a different...
Okay, so it's about personal discipline, perhaps, isn't it?
No, it's about expectation as well. Employers are
expecting.
There's an expectation that you'll take your work home with you, you'll answer the emails, etc.
Let's ask Manish
But it's also
about
the
that.
nature of the work has changed. So if you're working long hours and you're working a physical activity, for example, which is what we would have done in the past, you're getting a certain amount of stress relief from that activity. We're now working these hours, but it's an intense hot house experience where we're not doing the natural things that our bodies want us to do to de-stress. So we actually have a build-up of stress hormones in our system, which can then lead to more acting out on the part of the individual to want to somehow medicate away the difficulty of that. So the nature of work has changed profoundly. But what hasn't changed is our need for validation through work. That has always been the case. And yet we have this work that doesn't validate us back and doesn't give us back as much.
Unanswerable in many ways. Yeah. Manish, in the end, you had enough of this and you're now a much happier person. judging by the smile on your face. How did you turn it around? What was your light bulb moment?
Well, I got sick, which is usually the classic light bulb moment for people who are workaholics. And in my case, I had extremely acute mono, and then I had exceptionally high levels of inflammation levels that you would typically see with cancer or lupus. And in my case, that didn't happen, but it was a big wake-up call. I was sleeping, I could barely function. And the thing that I would throw into all of this is this point of being always on is huge. So whether you suffer from workaholism or workism, the biggest thing, and I've worked in financial services, I'm 49, over the last 25 years that I've noticed, when I started, you were not expected to be always on, and you had some time to refresh on vacations or evenings or weekends. Now, it doesn't matter if you're using work to cover a childhood wound or you're using work to find your identity. You don't have that mental space anymore to disconnect, or you're considered a slacker. And I think that...
Do you think that's absolutely true? Or is it an expectation that we or people place upon themselves, that they expect to be their validation to come from being needed 24 hours a day? Are employers actually saying, you got to do this?
No, I think we're putting it on ourselves in many ways as a result of what we're seeing other people do. So it's become this a funny mirror effect, and I think social media plays a big role in it. When we start seeing hashtags about, giving it your all
I think positive psychology has a lot to answer for in this one, to be honest. Suggesting to people that...
You mean rather like sort of there are no losers in this running race,
yeah,
you're all
also,
winners.
well, not just that. I mean, I think this idea that you have to be this excellent version of yourself all the time, that there is some standard that you're going to reach and that you always have to be there, rather than the truth of it, which is as human beings, we're vulnerable. We go through highs, we go through lows, we go through ups, we go through downs, and that's the way it is.
Can I ask Jonan about the sort of work you do and what your main message is to people? It's about living a holistic life.
Well, so I think there's two. So on the workplace training, I was talking to Noel, there's a great organisation called Mental Health First Aid, which has been doing a lot across workplaces. So there's awareness training for teams, for staff, some of whom will have no experience of mental health, some will have some. What we wanted to do during this last summer is also bring an element of team and unconditional. So away from workplace, we had, for example, inclusive cricket tournaments.
Now, I saw some of it.
Right, so that's just to
Except
say...
you play with a softball.
Well, there was a little softball. And by the way, I'm not a cricketer myself, so playing with a softball was lovely for me. But the one aspect, that's not to say, hey, this team game is going to solve everything, but at least it's to say, in this environment, it's unconditional. You just come here, have fun. You don't actually have to win it. I don't know there's this thing of competition or not, but you're playing somewhere in a team where you get a feeling of community and something holistic coming to you.
And you have to leave all your smartphones and all your laptops and all your other devices out?
Naturally, you want to do that, because once you're there playing with other people, you naturally don't have use for the smartphone anymore.
So we come back to how do we sort this out? And as I said at the beginning, I think I know where we're going to some extent, and that is we blame it on the technology of today and the social attitudes of today, because we don't ever feel...
I think that is a motto. I keep saying it's the structure of our society. If we put certain figures on it, of OECD countries, USA...
These are the richer countries in the world.
Yep. It is US, UK, have the highest number of youth imprisoned, the highest number of people in prison, and the highest number of mental disorders. Technology is used, for example, in Germany, equally as it is used here or anywhere else, but we have lowest number. Really? Why?
Yeah, okay.
It is the structure of how the society is structured and how they use the capital. The capital is used for long-term investment.
Capital being human capital.
Human and financial capital is used for long-term investment of improving humans' life, not as a short quarterly investments to just make a lot of money.
It shouldn't be about making money, it should be about...
No, I don't say...
What?
No, it should be, but it has to be balanced. We need much more humane sort of capital. It's responsible capital rather than just share how the
And if you get somebody who says, listen, you're just being soft, you're giving people an easy life,
Well,
for goodness
just
sake, just get on with it.
neuroscience
What
blows
is
them out of
the
the water.
end result of that approach?
Well, first of all, you have, we have quite a lot of our health services. A lot of our health services suffer for people of stress at work. And we just heard it is medication, it's all kind of thing. So at the end, you have that costs then in other ways showing in your budget of economy than you would have if you have a healthier workforce. So I think healthier workforce is more productive and is cheaper to run your health services.
And also the evidence is, if you look at the neuroscience of it, we're designed to engage with each other and work collaboratively. That's why we dominate this planet as human beings, because we're incredibly complex social animals. We organise ourselves into incredibly complex groups. You look at a phone, it's not technology, it's incredibly complex groups of people creating that stuff. When you start breaking that up, you actually destroy productivity, which is the insane thing about it. Coming back to this attitude of, oh, you're just being namby-pamby, it's not true. We're talking about different areas of the brain doing different functions. So our higher functioning, the fact that we dominate the planet, is all in our frontal lobes and prefrontal lobes.
Can you be, I'll say workaholic, Manish, but I know that's probably not the right word. Can you be one of these people and be happy as well?
I do not think you can be a true workaholic and be happy, because if you are a workaholic, you are, I would argue by definition, using that the same way an alcoholic would be, or any other kind of addict, to cover up some inner pain. If you are engaged in workism, however, I do believe that some people are truly happy in that manner of living, but it is a smaller manner of living. And what I mean by that is that, when companies have you volunteer together or they have you play cricket together, that's great. But whatever happened to doing it, whatever happened to shutting off work, having a boundary there and putting emphasis on family, friends, community, faith, doing your volunteer work separate from the office. We're getting too many of our human needs met in the workplace. And I think that will ultimately lead to work not making people happy.
Yeah. Sorry, Jenny.
No,
Go on, please.
But no, it makes sense to me, because I'm even thinking, and probably all of us around the table, actually, when you get into work, you love it. So when you talk about number of, it's not. I actually, when I'm into something, I'm loving working hard. So question is, who's got a responsibility to then make you take the time out? Maybe we're going to have to force each other to do that somehow. So even in a company, say you're having a baby, hopefully you're forced to take X, Y, Z weeks off. I'm just wondering who's going to have that responsibility. Is it the government's going to say, guys, every 8 months, take time?
It's being portrayed as a little black and white here, whereas in fact everybody is very, very different. I mean, you wouldn't go to Mozart and say, for goodness sake, please take a day off composing. I would think you'll write better music if you do.
No.
Some people are compelled to do what they do.
Okay, but we need to have, it's a different level. We need smart policies at the government level. We need smart policies at organizational level. And we have to have development of people themselves to have a control of their life.
But that's going to cost me and my paperclip company money initially.
Of course, but you'll have a healthier workforce. So in long run, you'll have your money back.
It's going to cost you more in sickness time if you don't do it.
Exactly.
And I agree with you on the black and white, there, in the sense that, well, I'm not sure a manager that all of us say as we go up in our careers are going to know how to do it and how to do it well. So I don't think it should be all on the manager. But take Mozart, right? If he's there 19 hours a day bashing away and his wife comes up or his husband and says, look, you should go for a jog and you're going to feel better and write a better symphony.
If it was Beethoven, he wouldn't have been able to hear it.
Well, you're right. But they were probably right. Most of those Mozart crew and others, they probably got themselves into serious trouble. Yeah. They obviously created amazing things for us as a human race. But it's probably likely that his life partner told him, go to the gym.
That's a great
he said
no.
But again,
Amadeus and the dumbbells.
And also mental health is actually is quite simple and is quite similar for all of us, to be honest. So we only need to do a certain number of small number of things on a regular basis, and we create mental resilience within ourselves. It's a bit like going to the gym. If you want to get fit, you go to the gym, you work out. You can do exactly the same with your mental health. It's a small range of things that you just repeat on a regular basis. You eat well, you sleep well, you exercise, you socialise with people. You get those things right, and then your productivity and your life circumstances go through the roof.
I don't know if I've got time, but I do want to go to Manisha before we end the programme. Look, big smile, you're happy now. What's your 30 seconds of advice to somebody else who may find themselves feeling crowded in by what they do at work?
I think the number one thing is to learn how to disconnect. I'm thrilled to start seeing American corporations who literally lock down your email when you're on vacation. Yes. So you literally cannot look at it, and they delete it all when you come back. And a little email goes out to whoever reaches into you and lets you know, I'm on holiday, and if you want me, email me when we come back, because all my emails are going to be deleted. Things like that really help. And so whether it's boundaries. At the end of the day, that's
balance and boundaries. Listen, thank you. And I'm very pleased to say that one of the books I can see behind your head says rest.
Yes.
If only we could. Thank you very much indeed. I'll have plenty of time to rest when I'm no longer here. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Nada, Jonan, Manisha, thank you. And thank you very much for watching. That's our 30 seconds, or rather 30 minutes of work. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.